from my group see it, or when it goes live, is it going to say?
It won't, but we can put it on YouTube.
Okay.
And
perfect.
then.
Yep.
All right. Okay, I hope this doesn't fall.
It was not going to fall.
Hi, everybody. We're here with Scott Howell. He's the former Senate Minority Leader for Utah and also a former U.S. Senate candidate. Thank you, Scott. It's an honor to have you here with us.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be with you.
Thanks. So just some quick announcements before we get started with the interview. On May 13th, the Arkansas group is having a guest speaker, Amanda Aristando. She's an immigration advocate, and that will be on Facebook Live in the Arkansas group. On the same day, May 13th, there will be a Constitution rally in the Utah State Capitol. And then May 31st, we'll be here in this group with David Harding. He's a Provo councilman. So let's go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you.
And also feel free to ask questions. Type them in the comments, and I'll be watching here below. And let me just actually check to make sure that's loaded. Okay, turn the volume down. All right. So the first question that I have is, what principles of leadership have you learned from your time as senator? And the more principles you can give, the better, because this is personally the most important.
Sure.
Is leadership, because I think we are lacking that leadership. So which principles are most important to you?
Well, you're not alone in thinking that that's some of the principles that's lacking right now. As we see survey after survey with regards to Congress, a lot of people are upset at Congress, and they're saying that their lack of leadership. I think for me personally, what the principles that are most important is, number one, the principle of integrity, and being able to show the integrity of the system, not to cheat, not to lie, and not to do harm to someone else. I think the second principle for me that's really key is this whole thing about collaboration. You know, it's a collaborative effort. Government's not easy, and when you get together, you have to be collaborative. You have to be able to be willing to see the other person's point of view. And I always say the good Lord bless us with 2 ears and 1 mouth. We ought to do twice as much listening.
Yeah, and on top of that, compromise has become a dirty word. I think compromise is it's necessary to be an adult, to have a civil life.
Well, McKay, I'm glad that you brought that up, because as you advance in your career, you'll find, especially when you get married, that compromise is not a dirty word, and you better learn it real quick.
Yeah.
Because in a family relationship, and I'll give you an example. My wife, Linda, is a Republican. And
really?
Yeah. Come on over and say hello, Linda.
Doesn't want to come.
Yeah. But our whole marriage has been about listening and about respecting each other's point of view. And take politics out, but anything within a marriage relationship, finances, personal things, what are we going to, we're going to go on the family vacation. One might want warm, one might want cold. It's all about compromising in the middle. And I apply that principle to politics. And when I served, I had a great relationship with the President of the Senate, the Majority Leader, and more often than not, we sat down and said, how can we create a win-win? And I think Steve Covey taught that principle so well. And it applies really to politics today more than ever.
Yeah. In his book, it was actually a step up from compromise. Right. It was like win-win is everybody benefits. And I think that we could definitely see that as a country. There's we'll talk about those issues later, but
sure.
There's some issues that all Americans could win if we could just learn to work together. It's not that one side loses and other side gains. It's
right.
Everybody wins.
Yeah, and that's really the principle that I think is the most important when we look at candidates that are going to go into office. Are they willing to stand by their principles, but willing to also listen to understand the different points of view? And that's really key in my mind to have a successful government. That's what's going to keep our country the great country that it is.
Yeah, I think that's key. And what other principles of leadership are are most important to you?
Well, the one that I think is just so fundamental has to be this whole thing about giving and taking. And that's different than the principle of compromise, because in a negotiation setting, what you want to do is position yourself to make sure that well, we said it earlier, that you create the win-win. I think another principle that's really a key in this is this whole notion of you're not my enemy just because you're in the other party. Mm-hmm. In fact, this very day, I had a conversation with an individual who told me how much he hated this other elected official. And I said to him, have you ever sat down with them and gone to lunch and tried to understand their point of view about what's going on in your city council? He said, no, I've never done that. And I said, think about this for a minute. You don't know anything about the other person. You don't know their personal situation. You don't know their family situation. And that's what we need more than ever in government, is to have a cohesive, where you're not the enemy. Yeah, we're in different parties, but you know what? I don't hate you. I always say to people when I speak, how many of you hate liberals? Mm-hmm. And I say, how many of you really hate conservatives? And, you know, the hands are kind of like, they really don't go up because they don't want to play that card. I said, how many of you dislike the other person? Mm-hmm. And then I always ask them, have you ever sat down to get to know them? And none of them have. You might like that. I mean, clearly in our relationship, I like my wife a lot. I would have never married her. And she would have never married me. But, you know, I think that's another principle of working together and overcoming disagreements.
Mm-hmm. And just so our audience knows that Scott Howell, he was a Democrat.
Yeah.
And his wife is a Republican.
Yeah.
But this is Utah.
Yeah, this is Utah.
So
yeah.
A Democrat in Utah is like, so I'm from New Jersey. A Democrat in Utah is almost a Republican, like my representative.
Right.
Not almost, but I mean it's very centrist. So.
And I think so. A Democrat like me in California is not the Democrat. I'm probably a Republican down there because the Republicans are so mainstay and centrist. Mm-hmm. They're Democrats, and I'm not categorizing all of them, but the majority are so far to the left, and that's the challenge that you see. I often, when I speak to groups, I often tell them that I'm not left, not right, but forward. I believe that party affiliation, if you're not moving forward and you're not causing change for the good of the American citizen, then you're not really doing a service for our country.
And just so you're aware, there's a bunch of people in our groups that are supporters of the Centrist Project.
Oh, sure.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
So they're looking for candidates. They want to get like 4 or 5 candidates in the Senate so that they can kind of bring the left and the right closer to the middle, because they'll be that swing vote.
Well, that's where it is, and I think that's really the value of the centrist organization and the movement. It's to be able to look at both sides and sit down. You know, the crazy thing about this, the people who lose when you become so far left or so far right in party affiliation are the citizens. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a very thin, narrow group of citizens that want a candidate to never, ever give up. I mean, never compromise one little bit, come hell or high water. The reality is that's a small segment of our population. Mm-hmm. And you look in Congress today on the Affordable Care Act, 28 members of the Freedom Caucus kept that, you know, the revisions and the change on the Affordable Care Act from changing. That's a big statement that 28 people could do that out of 400 plus members of Congress.
Yeah. And it's not even that big of a number, but they were enough.
Yeah, you were.
To make a change.
That was it. Exactly right. I mean, that's the key on that.
And just one more thing, talking about how people are upset with Congress being so partisan. I was in Georgia last month. So we had our new conservative movement. We had a candidate in that special election.
Oh, sure.
And his name was David Abrams. And we went out knocking doors for him. And so it was really interesting. A lot of the people, this is Trump country.
Oh, sure.
This is a very conservative district, Newt Gingrich's district. And a lot of the people, they were Republicans, and they were saying, I don't know, but I'm just tired of the partisanship. I'm just so sick of it. I mean, I am a Republican, but I'm just sick of what's going on.
Well, Frank Luntz recently completed a poll for the National Governors Association. And on that poll, he asked, what are the most important issues? And you can send that out to the audience. and healthcare was number 4. The economy was up there, but it was about getting along. And then he asked a very interesting question. What's your opinion of Congress? 79% of the thousands of people that they pulled across the U.S. said Congress is an abysmal failure. Blame both parties, not just one party, but both of them. And I think what's indicative of what you saw down in Georgia is this feeling of, yeah, we've been party loyal and we've been party this, but you know what? Party is not the important thing. I love what our lieutenant governor out here in Utah said, and that's one of the foils you have in there as well. His name's Spencer Cox, and I'll share this with the audience, and he's a Republican, but he said, people are sick of putting the party first. We should put so many other things first. God, family, the local basketball team should be ahead of the party. Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. And I think that really exemplifies what's going on. And, he couldn't have said it better. And I think what his comments was sending a message to people. Come on, there's more important things than just your party loyalty.
Yeah. And if you guys want to see these sheets he has here, I posted them in the previous post. It's a link to the PDF.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Did you have another one, or can we move on?
No, we'll move on, yeah.
All right. Anything else that you want to say about leadership? Are you okay?
No, I think leadership is so critical. And I'll tell you one other thing about leadership. You have to maintain a sense of humor. You have to. And when I say that, I'm not being flippant. What I'm being is, you have to know that every day is going to be a challenge. You have to respect the citizen that just pulls and beats down on your ear, as well as the one that tells you how great things are. The other thing that I'd say about leadership, you shouldn't breathe your own air once you get into office. Mm-hmm. There's a message there about thinking, oh, I am so great now that I'm Senator Howell, and this poll says that, and that poll says that. And I used to tell my staff all the time, there's a poem by Phil Silverstein, and it goes similar to this. Tell me I'm great, tell me I'm handsome, tell me that I am the best there is, but if you don't tell me the truth, don't tell me anything at all. And what I found the first couple of years before I was elected minority leader is I'd have some of my staff just say all these wonderful things, but nobody was telling me the other side of the story. And so from that point, I learned quickly, I wanted my staff to give me all points of view. There was no bad news. Mm-hmm. There was only news that was important to listen. And that's a principle of leadership that I see so often with some of our elected officials. Even though those that have been there for years and years and years, they breathe their own rarefied air. And that's not healthy for anybody.
And the best example of that in the world is our president.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. And I want Donald Trump to be successful. I do. I didn't vote for him, but I want him to be successful because he is the leader of our country. But he's got to give me some shots here where he can be successful, And I think the rarefied air for him, he might be humbling a little bit. I don't know. I hope he is. I hope he tries to do the right things for our country.
Oh, and then I guess I got to take that back. Maybe Kanye West.
Yeah.
But
good for you, okay.
So we have a question from Terry McCabe.
Hi, Terry.
We have 2 questions. Let's see. Okay. Has there been an issue going into a legislative session you thought was important, but another issue ended up consuming your time?
Oh, that's the balance of what happens on the day of a legislator. And the best example, Terry, that I can give to you of that is on the policy side, you really want to do some initiatives. I'm a big education guy. I believe that quality education, performance data-based, is really going to help our country more than anything else. I worked for IBM for 34 years, so I have a technology background. And I remember one session I was really doing a lot on education, but that year our budget was really challenged, and all of a sudden the appropriations process consumed almost all my time. I was the ranking member on the Executive Appropriations Committee, and I had to really balance back between the policy and the financial matters of state government. But it can it can go down in the rank of importance once you're very involved in the budgetary process and you're trying to make sure that funding is there for the right causes. So that's a good question. That's an interesting one. You must have worked on a staff and have seen how that happened in the past.
So you said education was your
yeah, that's my passion.
Yeah,
it really
is.
And
was there something that kind of took away from that, or that made it difficult to focus on education?
Well, I think when IBM transferred us here to Utah, and I'd grown up here, and when we left Georgia, we were actually in Atlanta, down in Marietta.
Oh, that's where I was. That's district.
When you said New Gingrich, I thought that was it.
Yeah.
We were down there. Our son had full-day kindergarten with a math specialist, PE specialist, and a reading specialist. And when we moved to, they had a total, I don't know how many were in the class.
18.
18 were in the class. We moved to Utah, and I'll never forget this. I took him to kindergarten. His name's Brian. And I sat there with a teacher, and there was like a sea of bodies in there. I swear there was 32 kids. And I said to the teacher, "Oh, so you're combining classes today?" And she said, "No, this is my classroom." And I said, "You got this many kids?" And she said, "Yeah." And then she said, the big bomb, she said, "Oh, but I get an aide this year. I'm going to have aide." So I said, "Okay." So I went to leave, and I said, "Do I pick him up around 3:30 or what time?" 3:30. He said, "No, you pick him at 11:30. I said, "Well, it's 9:30 now." And she said, "Oh, in Utah we have half-day kindergarten." So I didn't want my son to have to compete against the student in Georgia that had full-day kindergarten. And so that's why I got involved in politics, because I wanted to change our law to have kindergarten part of our comprehensive education system and also to fund it for full-day kindergarten.
I like that.
Well,
I like education.
Well, and it starts in preschool. This generation, your generation, and your kids' generation are so much more talented, so much more adept at an iPhone. I look at my cell phone and what it does. It does more things now than what I used to sell equipment that took up the whole room at IBM. And it's faster and quicker and smaller. But your generation is going to have a technology revolution that's really going to be spectacular.
Yeah, I think one thing that we benefit from is that we grew up with the internet and this technology. Maybe we're not so much smarter, but we're used to using it.
And you're not afraid.
Yeah.
You're not afraid to try something.
We used to try and make things more efficient.
Exactly.
With technology.
Well, I think that's what's going to drive the economy. Effective, efficient manpower that knows how to do things. I mean, look at the mobile workforce that allows you to, literally, you can be on your job all day if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. And the other side of that is you can go to your kid's ballet or your kid's school program in the middle of the day with the mobile workforce, mm-hmm. and that's where it's all going.
And just one thing, we interviewed Mayor Curtis.
Oh, yeah.
Ago, and I did tell him hi for you.
Thank you. He's a great guy. I have ultimate respect for him.
Yeah, he's really popular. He's really awesome. Yeah. So he said about education, when businesses were looking to move into Provo, they didn't ask about the tax structure. The first thing they asked was about the education system, because they were worried about, I guess, the workforce that they were going to have access to.
The workforce. Well, at IBM, and I can speak authoritatively on this, when we were looking at relocating a facility or a collaborative center, we didn't care about the tax rate. We wanted to know what that education force looked like and what we'd have to deal with. So mm-hmm. Mayor Curtis, the mayor of Provo, Utah, is spot on that. And education rules for most tech companies. They need to have the best and the brightest, so they have a talent pool that can fulfill all their needs.
Mm-hmm. And I recently read a book, and it was about the development of the computer and the internet.
Oh, yeah.
And how much, I think it was Stanford, is that up in Silicon Valley?
Yep.
How much the investment that, I guess the government working with Stanford, how that was so vital for Silicon Valley, because they worked so closely together to develop all these new technologies.
It was. And people can say a lot of negative things about the government, but this was one program they funded. And Al Gore wasn't the inventor of the internet, but he did play a key role in it.
Yeah.
It was back in the Clinton administration days where they were really forcefully saying this is something that could revolutionize our economy, mm-hmm. our strength, our military strength. It started out as a military app, mm-hmm. and that's what they were trying to do. But then they saw all the commercial possibilities, and then it just swung over to family and personal.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, we're conservatives, but
what does that mean? What does that mean?
Mostly it means, I believe, being closer, having less government, and focusing more on individual responsibility. But I think that, so we do generally favor less government, but I think education is something that at least we need to put more emphasis on. That's something that I'm more willing to spend more on, to have the government be more involved. Because I think that does help us to become more responsible personally.
Well, I think, McKay, with your definition, that I must be a conservative. Now, the Democrats will probably say, wait, I thought you were liberal. I think those labels are losing their oomph in today's world. I think that the way you just described that, I think I'm as conservative and liberal as anyone else, but what I really think of myself is being normal. I'll never forget, I was doing an interview, big one, on national TV, and the commentator said, well, how would you describe yourself? And I said, I'm normal. I think I have taken the far left principles, some of the far left, far right, and they're principles that are good. I mean, we should all want less government. We should want more accountable government. We should want more effective, efficient government that drives the value proposition it's different than a business. It's not like IBM. I will tell you that when I first went into office, I thought I was going to revolutionize the world and change it. I learned a lot about government and methodical, lethargic sometimes nature of what happens, but I think the Founding Fathers meant that to be. And so, can we make government more effective and efficient? Absolutely. Is that a liberal principle or a conservative? I don't know, but I think for me, that's the only principle that we should have, is make it as effective and efficient as possible.
And so that's something about us being new conservative. We're trying to redefine conservatism. And we're more friendly towards, a lot of people that I've spoken with, we're definitely more friendly towards education.
Well,
making that a priority.
It has. When you think about, I've had the privilege of going to China. Actually, we went over there on an education trip, but I went to India, and that's the one that blew me away. I was out in a little remote village. I asked the driver to take me out of our routine. We were on a kind of a organized routine. I said, I want to go way out. So we went out to this little village, and the classroom was probably as big as this room. There were about, how many kids would you say are in there? I don't know, 20? They had on their little uniforms, and I'll never forget we went in the faculty room, which was 2 chairs over here, one for the principal and one for another teacher. That was the faculty room. And they all had on uniforms, and I'll never forget this. They spoke almost perfect English. They're in first grade. And one of them said to me, sir, do you have an Apple phone? And I went, are you kidding me? And I said, well, what do you want to do with the phone? Oh, I'd like to develop apps someday. Think about the India culture that puts so much emphasis on education. Kids who have adapted to the technology. And this is probably one of the most penurious places in India that you could find. I mean, it was really... right outside of the school, there was a little shack, and the mother, the grandmother, the husband, and the wife, and about 4 kids were in that little shack. And, they were cooking outside, but their kids were in there, and that's the great thing about education. It propels those who take advantage to a whole different realm of opportunity. And that's, I'm with you. Education is the key to success.
Yeah, I was a teacher in Taiwan for a
little bit. Oh, you were?
So, I know they take it very, very, very seriously.
Maybe a little too seriously over there.
The parents, they spend so much money.
Oh, yeah.
They go to school, these expensive private schools, and then they go to night school.
Yes. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, their economy has changed so much in the past 30 years. They went from a developing country to now, GDP PPP.
Yeah.
They're about the same for the purchasing power parity. They're about the level as the German.
Isn't that amazing
So
where they did
within
that?
one generation they jumped up.
You know, it's interesting that you shared that with us, McKay, because one of the things I learned in China is they're so almost like robot on their education.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing they miss that the Americans still, I believe, have the advantage on is creativity.
Yeah.
And I think that creativity stems from a little child laying out on the grass, looking up in the sky, and wondering why. And as disciplined as the Taiwanese, the Chinese, the Indians are, I think that's the one thing that they miss, is that creativity opportunity to look in that sky and say, what if?
So that makes me think, what is your opinion on Common Core then? Because some people might say, including me, since I was a teacher, I don't like so much emphasis on testing.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
You know, I think when Common Core came into place, and it was under the Bush administration when they had gone back and Ted Kennedy was a part of it, I think it went to the other side of extreme calling for the accountability. I think what it forgot was the side of the student that might not be able to learn that subject at that pace at that time and then get tested and blame it back on the teacher. You know, every child comes from a different circumstance. I know children who's from a single parent and one of the parent works 2 jobs. They don't have the same advantage of a parent who is a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, and they're helping them every day learning and carrying on. So I think we have to be careful on this whole testing notion and what it means. But this was in an effort for government to become more accountable and to be able to justify the amount of money that went in through the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm. And also, how do you feel about the federal government coming in, I mean, from a conservative perspective, coming in and telling the teachers and being more forceful on the teachers, I guess?
Well,
that's kind of how conservatives view it, so how would you address that?
well, there's 2 things about that. One of them is the principle that we lived as a family. We transferred all over the country with IBM, and I like the emphasis of when we transferred from Georgia to Utah or to California or Wyoming, that I wanted to make sure that the subjects taught there were on a minimal equal footing, that they were subjects that would be taught in Connecticut, that would be taught in Utah. So I like that aspect of the federal government trying to have an equal playing field. So the likelihood of you staying in Utah, you're probably going to move. You'll see when you move to another school, you want to have your kids where they are on the learning. And so I did like that aspect of the feds trying to do that. The best we can do in education is to have local control in terms of subject matter. But I think if we get into a too liberal or a too conservative, then we lose that value, because all of a sudden the school board members are ones that go, I don't want those books in my kid's school. The other ones are saying, I want those books in it. So there's a fine balance there. The feds, I think, though, on Common Core, they really extended above and beyond what the reach was.
Okay. So we have a question from Warren Zeidler, and he said, from your perspective, what are the best ways that average citizens can get involved and best influence the political landscape?
Great. Where's Warren from?
I don't know.
Okay.
Utah.
Okay. Warren, that's a really good question. I talk a lot about, people used to say to me when they'd come in my office, they'd say, you know, the government really drives me crazy. And I'd have to pause a minute and said, you know what, okay, I am the government. Well, not you, Scott, it's the others. And I'd say, well, then we need to know what the others are and what mistakes they're making. Warren, the most important thing that you can do is get involved and start a personal relationship with your elected officials. This starts at the city, it goes to the county, it goes to the state, and to the federal offices. And it's simple as being a delegate for either party, both parties, and then it goes on to reaching out. It's so critical that you develop that personal relationship, as personal as it can be, and being a resource for an elected official. Hey, look, the day I got elected, I didn't change. I was still Scott Howell. And I learned quickly that I needed help in real estate, laws. I needed help in rural Utah laws. I needed help on a plethora of different subjects. And what you want to do is be a resource for that elected official. So if you came to me and said, hey, I'm Warren and I have an expertise in this and congratulations on getting elected, whether you voted for me or not, it didn't matter. But if you would be willing to be a resource, a trusted resource, where I could come to you and say, you know, Warren, you're an expert in this subject. Could you help me? That's really how you develop the very best relationships to make change. I had what's called a kitchen cabinet, and you know what? Somebody told me at one time that I had more Republicans on my kitchen cabinet than I had Democrats. I said, I've never ever thought about that, because there were individuals, trusted people that I knew wouldn't lead me astray on good education. And as an elected official, you're dealing with so many subjects, from healthcare. I mean, every industry out there, you're all of a sudden supposed to be the expert in it. Well, a true politician knows what their capabilities are and knows their limitation and is willing to go out and have people help them.
And so can you give some examples of people, just common people,
oh, sure,
who gave you that expertise?
Oh, sure. Teachers would come to me.
I like that. I think that's way important.
Teachers would come to me and say, you know, I'm teaching in the classroom and there's this bill that you guys want me to change this and this. Let me tell you what that would happen to my children. Construction workers. I had I sponsored some construction legislation. Now, I can't even pound a nail. I'm not very good, but I knew there were some problems with our lien laws in Utah. And we reached out to different construction people. The commercial guy, Alan Layton, who I think was in the Elephant Club, big-time Republican. I trusted him, helping me understand what was going on in the construction industry. Same token, the AFL-CIO, you know, it's all sometimes been characterized as this far-left unionized company. What I really found out is that they were workers who wanted rights and wanted equal pay for equal work. And you know, I had them both on my coming and working with me because I needed the edification. I really needed that more than anything else.
So did you have meetings with all of them, or would they just email you separately?
No, I'd invite them in, and some of them I'd ask to serve on my kitchen cabinet, and I'd bring them in together, and it was real critical for me to take the time to invest to understand public safety. I didn't know a lot about law enforcement. I didn't know a lot about gun laws. I was a hunter. I've hunted my entire life, but I didn't know some of the nuances. And you know, I turned to public safety to help me on a lot of questions. The Utah Highway Patrol was one of the greatest resources I had, as well as the local public safety, the sheriffs and the police. So,
yeah, I think that's great for leaders they don't know everything.
They don't.
And so they need to listen to people. And I guess that's one of the big principles of democracy and of our government is that, like, to take it on a different level, we have states working on different things. We have different strengths and different populations, and it's not just from the top down, one person or one institution. So I'm just a big fan of bringing things to a local level.
McKay, and Warren, this goes back to your question. The best legislation I ever sponsored and got passed didn't come from lobbyists. It came from citizens. Not all of them were in my senatorial district. I listened to all of them. I had people from St. George to Howell, Utah, up near the Idaho border, from Vernal, from Elko, Utah, that had come to meet with me, and that's probably because I was the minority leader and I felt like I had that responsibility. But some of the best legislation I ever had came from McKay, came from Warren. And that's where you really, the rubber hits the road on being what I believe is an effective leader.
Yeah, so this is a good opportunity for everybody. If you have more questions, write them in. And that's something similar to what Evan McMullen, he wrote something a month ago, just like a list of things that we can hold our leaders accountable.
Yeah.
And one of the top ones was get to know who your representatives and work with them closely.
And you know, what you'll find is sometimes I teach a course to companies on how to develop a relationship, and these are executives who are big name. But when I'll raise the question, I'll say, how many of you know your local state senator? And most of them raise their hand and say, oh, I know it. It's Dianne Feinstein. And I go, no. Not your U.S. senator, your local senator. And they go, I wouldn't want to get to know them. They're blah, blah, blah. And they wouldn't take my call. And I go, wait, you're a leader in your community? You're a constituent? They'll take your call. But there's this kind of aura myth about the magic curtain that happens when somebody's elected, that all of a sudden they go into a different realm. So I tell people all the time, know who your local city council member is, know your mayor, know your county commissioners, know your county mayor, know your state legislative leaders, and they want to hear from you. It's just having the courage to do that. You know, we're not kings. Although sometimes people try things like that, we're not. We're just, we really are serving the people, and that's something that you can't forget.
Yeah, I'm glad you don't think of yourself as a king.
I
wish more people would be like that. See themselves as servants rather than kings.
Right.
So we have another question. So I guess this could end up being long. I don't want to make it too long.
I won't make it.
Because it's 5 things.
Oh, okay.
So what are 5 issues that the left and right can find common ground on and should be able to pass through Congress if the gridlock ever ends?
Well, and we might see that this week. You know, the budget is up, and if they don't come to a resolution, we could see another shutdown. So the 5 things I'd say that are very critical where the left and right can come together, and this will be a prime example, is on the budget. You know, we can't continue in deficit spending. I don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican. We have to put some controls out there and call for some accountability. So I think the budget is number 1. The second one is education. I think that we can have common ground and improve the education offerings and give back some power to the states. Number 3 has to be healthcare. I mean, it really has to be healthcare. Single payer system to no insurance at all. I mean, it goes the gamut. And I believe that cooler, smarter heads can prevail to come up with a plan that works for everyone. The other one is transportation. I'm a big believer that our infrastructure, and when I say transportation, I'm talking about the infrastructure. Who doesn't want safe roads? Who doesn't want a better way to commute? The 5th one would have to be the whole notion of state rights. And what I mean by that is what principles can we agree on to give states the right that they want? And the prime example on that is here in Utah we have what's called the Bears Ear Monument. It was a monument created by President Obama, and it was in the last days of his administration. The far left is jumping up and down for joy. The far right saying, oh, it was a land grab, you shouldn't have that. There ought to be a compromise where it benefits all. And at the heart and soul of that issue is the Native American, where they are, it's their land. You know, I mean, it really is their land. And so I think on issues like that, all those 5, that the left and right can come together. And you don't necessarily have to be an enemy on these, because what you want to do is benefit everyone. You know, aren't we grateful that Theodore Roosevelt had the vision to create Yellowstone Park? And aren't we grateful that other leaders have said, when Bill Clinton was in there with Newt Gingrich, they said, we're going to balance the budget. And that has to. There's a 6th area that I want to talk about too. Military spending, the defense. It seems like we go from way extreme to we're going to fund everything in the military to we're going to cut everything in the military. I think there's a compromise that has to come together under a common thread of principles about where we are. Are we going to defend every country in the world? How are we going to treat our veterans? Will we give them the medical benefits that they deserve after their service? I don't know if one Democrat or one Republican would want to come together on providing benefits for those who gave their heart and soul and their family sacrifice while they were in combat to maintain our peace and freedom.
Yeah.
I just don't see that as a far left or far right, but they make it that way, and they should come together.
Is that one that you think will likely be able to pass through Congress, is improvements for veterans benefits?
I believe that President Trump, if he leads that initiative, that I can't see the far left or far right voting against that, because every district out there, congressional district or U.S. Senate, has veterans. And this will go back to Warren's question. As a veteran, they should be calling their elected official every day and saying, when I go to the VA hospital, I'm not getting what I need, and I need to have the benefits of what I was promised when I went into military combat.
Yes, I hope that's one they can get through. I mean, there's not a lot getting through, but what about infrastructure? How likely? Because I feel like there's not a lot to debate except for how much is pork and how much is actually getting to effective projects. But like, how likely do you think that we'll be able to improve our infrastructure?
Well, one of the things that I said when I ran for the U.S. Senate, that if I got back to Washington, what I wanted to do was set up a priority and have a data analytics of every project that was out there, from bridges to highways to all the things that make up the infrastructure. How likely is it to be that the pork versus the waste, and it's fraud and abuse, and pork is what I call it, versus the true needed ones? And when we talk about infrastructure, it's more than highways. It's also the airports, putting in new radar systems. And we have a radar system that was built on campfires across the country. Pilots flying and seeing, I know where I am because there's a campfire down. It's crazy. But I think it's critical to our economy that we invest back into the infrastructure. And if I was on that committee where transportation funding came from, I would make it mandatory that every state list the 5 criteria of the cost, the improvement, the number of jobs created, the number of local companies that were part of the bidding process, and did they come under bid. Design build concept is one that we used in here, Utah, for the Olympics. It worked very well, but it has to have some accountability into it. We just can't go throwing out money. And if you do that, if you're not questioning and you're not inspecting, then you're not going to get the results you need.
Can you explain a little bit more how Utah did it for the Olympics?
Yeah, I was in the Senate and I had the privilege of being on the Olympic Committee. What we did is we worked closely with the federal government, and we said, if we can get the money to improve our infrastructure on highways, on our airport, that we will be able to have this many local jobs and we'll have this many outcomes. And we did it what's called design build. We didn't sit down and design it all out and then have a traditional way of doing building. We designed it, and then we built that section. We designed it, built the next section. And what it did is it was very competitive for contractors to say, well, I can't give you the best price on this piece, but I can on this next one. And that's called a design build contract that worked very well in us for going for the Olympics. We didn't overrun the budget. We came in at budget. In fact, we came in below. And I think that was one of the shining examples of where Utah said we can do this, but we're going to do it a different way.
And what type of projects were included in the design build process?
Airport infrastructure. It was really upgrading our airport. Tracks. That's our mobile. Modal transportation. We have tracks in here, and it was in Atlanta. It's MARTA, transportate rapidly. Atlanta's through Atlanta. And ours was a system that we hadn't really built out. And it did two things for us. It helped on the environment because more and more people started taking tracks. We're a pretty big commuter from the suburbs into downtown Salt Lake. And so we had environmental benefit, we had citizen benefit, we had the whole notion of changing the way that you look at mass transportation. And it's been very successful. I remember I was one of the last votes to have our track system put in the state of Utah. My own family questioned me. They said, that's the biggest rat hole of money, taxpayer money that there will ever be. Nobody will ever ride it. Sometimes when I drive downtown and I see the tracks go by and it's completely full, I just smile. And one thing that it did for us, a benefit, is around the track stations they started to build a lot of infrastructure with apartments and homes, and people want to live close to tracks because they just walk over and get on.
The big one is big companies moving in.
Yeah.
A lot of tech companies, they try to locate close to a front runner or a track station.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And so I guess that's what they're looking for. Again, it comes back to the education and also the good transportation.
Well, and then environmentally, I mean, we could debate all night, is it scientific, is it not scientific? That's not the point. The point for me is, in Utah, we have bad air. We've got to do everything we can to come together to clean the air.
Yeah.
I mean, in the winter, there's bad air. Kids can't go out and have recess. I don't care if it's scientifically, whatever, climate change, all that. We just know we have bad air, and we got to fix it.
I must say, you were talking about India earlier. Our air is nothing.
Oh my gosh!
I was there a few months ago.
Isn't that?
Also in China, I thought China was bad, and then India was way worse.
Okay,
I didn't want to go outside.
It's horrible. and in China they use those little briquettes that they cook with. I mean, there's no environmental laws in China, and it's horrible. And they try and deny it.
Yeah, I was walking around like this, in Agra.
and same with India. In Mumbai, you probably
that's right.
And we went to Bangalore and some other places. It got a little bit better out as you got closer to the coast, but we don't want to get Utah or the U.S. to that degree.
Yeah. It's I didn't want to go outside. I just wanted a taxi to take me to these places. All right, and so you also talked about Obamacare, or not Obama, just healthcare in general.
Affordable care.
So that one there's lots of different viewpoints. How can the left and the right, what can they agree on?
Well, I think one thing that they can agree on, and this is interesting that you'd ask this, because there's a healthcare statement that I really like, and Frank Luntz had put this together, and I hope I've got that.
So Frank Luntz is a pollster for Fox News.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he's really, really smart. Maybe I didn't include that in here. But, this is the best healthcare sentence you could ever ask for. Personalized, patient-centered healthcare that treats you like a human being, not a number. Personalized, patient-centered healthcare that treats you like a human being and not a number. How do we get to that? Well, there is a lot of debate on that. I believe that the left and the right have to continue to come together and remember that it's a human being, not a number. It's not just some person that's got cancer or some person that's got this or that. These are human beings. The single payer system, the left will say, that's the only answer. The right will say, oh no, we need to, you got to earn more money, and the famous thing that Jason Chaffetz here, maybe you just shouldn't buy another iPhone and take your money and put it in that's the other extreme to the far side. There's nobody who has a $700 one-time policy. I mean, it's just not normal. But I think that we can come together on a healthcare system that fits and have benefits of both, of the private. I lived in England for a while. They have a healthcare system that replicates on one level a single payer. On the other level, they allow every citizen can have access to whatever level they want. In the ACA, there was supposed to be a gold, bronze, silver that they were going to do. That never really fully materialized. But we also have we're a Christian nation, and I say that with all respect to every faith, and every faith does. The Muslims, the Jewish, the Buddhist, there's a compassionate makeup of that. And just because we can be we've been blessed, we can't ignore sisters and brothers who don't have that. And, as long as we're going to be compassionate as a society, we still have that responsibility. And so I think when you can get the compassion along with the accountability and come together, that you can have a health care plan that works for everyone. I would have loved to have been back in Washington these last few years to debate that, because I think bringing in, the Tom Prices of the world, who's now the healthcare director. He was a former representative. Well, he was in that district.
Yeah, he was in
Tom Price. Yeah,
that's who we're replacing.
Yeah, exactly. But I think both sides of it, bring in a Bernie Sanders and sit down and talk about something that will work for everyone. We just don't have the deliberative, collaborative nature. I mean, it's almost like, well, I'm getting all my money from these people, so I can't say anything good about your system. Well, I'm getting all my money from them. You got to overlook the party side of it, and even the supporters, and go and do what's right for the citizens.
So, during the campaign, President Trump, he didn't give very many specifics, but one on healthcare specifically was that he wanted to open up competition among the states.
Yes.
How much do you think that would help the healthcare system, and do you think that's something that the left could get on board with?
Oh, I definitely think it would help. I think anytime you introduce competition to any principle of government, that you really are calling for greater accountability. And competition's not a bad thing. Competition breeds success, which breeds ultimately new ideas, innovation, and gives the opportunity for someone to figure out something that they haven't done before. So I'm a big believer in competition. It does breed a better product.
And one of the criticisms of Obamacare was that a lot of the insurance companies pulled out of the system. So, for example, in Utah, I think we just have Select Health.
Right.
So there's just one. So what do you think caused that, and what would you do to fix that problem with insurers pulling out?
Well, there were a lot of them that figured out that they couldn't make the revenues in order to justify the expense. And we had 2 or 3 of them that actually went into bankruptcy and then were picked up. I think you have to have a system that includes tax incentives for the provider. As you know, IHC is a not-for-profit organization, and so they don't pay the same taxes as another entity that's here. I guess Catholic Health is also a not-for-profit, but Modena and some of these others that are for-profit. And I think you have to have the ability for those 2 entities to work together and not be flooded with some patients, pre-existing condition was one of the benefits that I thought was really great in the ACA. So you wouldn't have to go back out and lose all of your benefits just because you have a pre-existing condition. The other thing that I thought on ACA was really good is the youth got to stay on their parents' plan until they're 26. And that meant a lot of beneficial opportunities for a student to be covered by a healthcare plan versus them going to the ED department. Every time you go to the emergency department and you're not covered, the costs skyrocket. And so the cost-benefit ratio of keeping someone on their parents' plan for a long amount of time versus you going into the ED department and having, just a pure accident. I mean, it couldn't even be your fault. You could be just walking down the street, you get hit. Options of which could be out there is that we go, oh, okay, sorry, your tough day, but we're not going to do that. We're going to take you to the nearest hospital. We're going to give you the best service we can because their physicians are charged with a Hippocratic oath to save your life and make you better. You have to figure out who's going to pay for that, though, at the end.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a combination of both that would make a healthcare system beneficial for everyone.
Okay. So you said that the ways that you think that we can compromise the issues, the left and the right, would be it was transportation, healthcare, education. But at least that there's a lot of common ground,
Right.
not that they'll necessarily do it,
Right.
but that we do share. And then the veterans
Right.
benefits, and then what were the other ones?
Defense.
Yeah.
Defense, I think, is one that's pretty important, and just the basic infrastructure of the country to come together to say, hey, you know what? As many Democrats cross that bridge as Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't put the money into it, it's going to collapse.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
It's.
The budget was one of them. Speaking of collapsing.
Yeah.
That was like the first one that you started out with.
And we'll see this week. We will see this week.
Yeah. Because the president threatened to shut down.
He did. He already threatened to shut down, and we know that from the past that didn't work, especially here in Utah. It shut down our parks, and thank goodness the state went in and tried to keep them open. And we built the federal government after they came back for the cost. But I think that the budget is just an area where you don't have to be hawkish. You don't have to be more socialist on it. It's a basic budgeting principle, a good principle, a sound principle. We know it can happen. With Clinton and Gingrich came together and balanced the budget. Mm-hmm. And, you know, these extraordinary things like the Iraq War that's taken billions. We have to be careful and analyze. We didn't even find weapons of mass destruction there, as we all know.
And that's also, you said that was defense was one, and that's one thing that the Republicans are now turning on, is that they don't like the war anymore either.
No.
Especially after this election, Trump, he attacked that decision a lot.
Right.
So I guess the left and the right now agree, for the most part, that they didn't want to be in as many wars, which is interesting. It's really, because I mean, that wouldn't have happened if there had been another candidate. It was Trump attacking that.
That's right. And he set kind of a benchmark of, you know, I'm not going to do that again. In our intelligence agencies, you know, they're.
So I thought Trump was actually pretty reasonable with.
I agree.
With certain things.
No, I agree.
All right. So we are gonna let you get to. You have prepared. There's a few more sheets that you wanted to share with us.
Sure.
And so you can take as little or as much time as you want.
Okay.
So the time is yours.
Well, thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any more questions. I think when Frank asked this question, he said, what would make you more afraid and concerned? Congress controlling your health care or your state legislators controlling your health care? 62% of people who responded just on health care said they would be more concerned that Congress, they were afraid of Congress. 38% said that they are more afraid of the state. So you can see that everyone needs to reduce the role of Congress. They want to do that. And I think that goes back to your basic fundamental question about reducing government. We often forget that not only when we talk about reducing government, we talk about reducing Congress and what they do. The other thing that drives me crazy about Congress is how many recesses they're on. Mm-hmm. I'm not kidding you. I just posted something that said if they can't get this budget thing done, they shouldn't get paid.
Yeah.
Why should they get paid if they can't come up with a budget?
They can't do their job.
They can't do their job.
Their basic job. Yeah.
And the other thing that I think, and I'll revert back to healthcare, is they're on this bronze, silver, this gold and diamond plan. And I think it would change the nature of how they look at healthcare if they were on the same Medicare plan or Medicaid plan or Medi-Cal plan if you're in California. Mm-hmm. I think that would change their tune pretty fast.
All right, so I don't know if you guys could see that, but it was 38%. So the people were more concerned about the state legislator, and 62% were more concerned about Congress. So they want it to be more local. More locally controlled.
They want a more individualized, more accountable healthcare system, less bureaucratic healthcare system, more innovative and intelligent healthcare system. Those were some of the things that they came back on the survey to say this is what we want to do. I think one other aspect that I think is pretty important. In order to deal with the challenges that we right now see with our Congress, here was the top 7 areas that was pulled. So what do you think is the most pressing issue facing your state today? And when you look at this, number 1 was government spending and waste. Isn't that interesting? And you look at the breakdown there, total 33% said that's what it was. 45% Republican, 36% swing, that'd be your independent, and 17% Democrat.
That was the top issue.
Yeah,
with government
number 1.
spending.
Yeah, number 2 was government accountability. And that pulled at 33%. Number 4 was raising cost of living. Look at this, 26% in the GOP, 41% in the swing vote, and then 29% in Democrats. Healthcare, that pulled at number 4. Taxes, number 5. Number 6 was education, and the last was jobs. And this is just a survey that came out 3 weeks ago. So you can tell that the American people have their priorities set, and they want government, but they want it to be effective, and they want to make sure that there's not waste, fraud, and abuse going on in government today.
I think education should be higher.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, as we kind of summarize here, I often say not left, not right, but we've got to move forward. And that's what I think people expect out of their elected officials, is to move forward and make sure. I just love, yeah,
Right
there you go. There you go. I just love this comment by Kasich, the governor of Ohio. He said, before we're Republicans and Democrats, we're Americans. What I say is we can't ever forget that we're Americans first before we're Democrat or Republicans. And I think if our elected officials could, and our people that are in Congress right now, could understand that it's us that are in charge, and as Congressman, you're there to help us. And we don't want your silly games. We don't want your posturing. We don't want well-heeled lobbyists to dictate to you on where your funding will be, and if you should support some pharmaceutical company because they might need a tax break, when it doesn't benefit everyone, but it might benefit you as an elected official in your fundraising. We've got to go back to Kasich. Before we're Republicans and Democrats, we're Americans.
Mm-hmm. And I think he believes that because he was the one of the final Republican nominees, he was the one that never supported Trump, even though the convention was in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And John Kasich, he never supported. He was the only one.
Sent a strong message, and that was a principle that he agreed on. And I think what his mission now is very clear, to go out and say, he's the president, elected fair and square, but you know what? We need to challenge and watch and make this work for everybody.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm a Kasich fan.
You can tell I'm a Kasich fan, too. So.
All right. Was there anything else that you wanted to share from you?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the group, and you can get my contact information, and feel free to contact me if you have any other questions. I'm pretty prejudiced about McKay. I hope this is okay. He worked on my second senatorial campaign.
Against Orrin Hatch.
Against Orrin Hatch, and I was thrilled to have him there, and a bright, intelligent student at Brigham Young University. He'd just returned from an LDS mission, and the one thing I remember about him is that his energy exuded, and he was pretty fresh jumping in the political game, but he did it. And so congratulations and for carrying on, and you know, your generation is the one that's going to make the difference for us. You're carrying the torch now, baby. Just don't let it burn out.
We'll try.
Yeah.
Well, we have former Senate Minority Leader of Utah, Scott Howell, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time and continued success in your movement, and I wish you the very best and Godspeed for our great country and our elected officials. That's real important to me, that we keep our country moving in the direction that is prosperous and gives all Americans equal opportunity and job opportunity and provides great education.
Thank you. All right. Well, this video will stay in the group. I'll post it, and then if you want to share it with people who aren't in the group, I'll also put it on YouTube too. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, and I just got to say, go Jazz! Big game tonight.
All right. Let's see.